justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a joy. Oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights, respecting human rights. What a wonderful nation this could be. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice.
Happy Monday to our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Let's Start Justice. I'm Mikkel Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ, and I'm joining you via the office, not in studio this week again, but we will make do from the office location. And you realize that Jade is again not with us this week. She is at another police training, and we have quite a bit coming up for the next few days. All right, but I'm flying solo, but I hope you will be in good company, right? So this week, I'm going to be joined by two of my favorite people, Patrick Layla, Policy and Advocacy Officer of Jamaica Aid Support for Life, my former place of employment. Happy and proud to be associated with the organization that does extremely good work for people living with and affected by HIV. And my other favorite person, who is Glenroy Murray, who is the Executive Director of Equality for All Foundation. And we're going to be following up on a conversation that you perhaps have heard in the public space. And I touched on it briefly last week. And as promised, we're going to be going in more detail around the issue of decriminalization of consensual sex among minors. And we're going to be explaining why we're using the word consensual, because that framing seems to be concerning among some in terms of why are we saying consensual when children under 16 can't consent, and whether or not we may unintentionally be promoting for children to be having sex with each other, which is not the case, but we're going to be clarifying all of that in short order. All right. Now, as is customary, let's go into our Did You Know, which Jade prepared for us. And the Did You Know for this week is taken from section 13, subsection 3G of the Constitution, our supreme law, and it speaks to the right to equality before the law. My apologies there. And the right to equality before the law means that everyone must be treated the same way by the law, no matter who they are. In simple terms, the law applies equally to everyone. No one should get special treatment or worse treatment because of things like their race, their gender, religion, social status, wealth, or background. And government officials, police, judges, and courts must treat people fairly and without discrimination. And when we're discussing the matter of decriminalizing consensual sex among minors, we're going to be talking about how our boys are disproportionately affected by that particular provision in law, which is one of the reasons for us saying, let's put in place the close-in age exemption. All right. The other matter for quick outline is our trivia question. And the trivia question for this week is, what is the mandatory minimum sentence for the offense of sex with a person under the age of 16? What is the mandatory minimum sentence for the offense of sex with a person under the age of 16? Now, last week and the week that was, just very quickly, I won't go into much detail, But for those who are paying attention, I trust you saw where Chief Justice Brian Sykes, um, I trust you were listening. It took 2 hours. I had colleagues and even some of our team members in the office said, boy, Chief Justice spending a whole time on explaining the reasoning behind his decision. And it's important because as we advocate and continue to advocate for the principle of open justice, um, to be applied in all matters, subject to, of course, certain issues. For example, if witnesses may be harmed or vulnerable witnesses like children, which the Special Evidence Measures Act makes some provisions for. Open justice is a principled one which JFJ supports. So outside of that, I think it's important that we paid attention to how Chief Justice gave detailed explanation into why the particular sentences were handed down for Julian Silvera for the indictment of manslaughter and using a firearm to commit a felony. And I believe it was instructive because you get a sense of how the aggravating and the mitigating factors do play such a significant role in understanding why judges come to a particular number of years that an individual must serve, where the law plays the specific role in saying that this is what the law dictates. These are the usual sentencing range for particular sentences or particular offenses, rather, versus where judicial discretion is aptly applied. And I think importantly, one of the discussions we heard coming out since this whole offense occurred is the matter of provocation and how that is used. And remember, Glenora Murray and we spoke on this particular issue at Nationwide at 5 on one evening. And JFJ, as we finalize our updated submission on the Domestic Violence Act, and remembering that a joint select committee has been convened, we're going to be making a specific recommendation on provocation and issuing caution because, as I previously outlined, while we should consider amending provocation under Section 6 of the Offences Against the Persons Act, um, to consider, for example, similar provisions in the United Kingdom. You do not want to go to where New Zealand went in just getting rid of provocation altogether. And we tried to strike the right balance in our recommendation to Parliament, and Parliament should be getting that updated submission by Wednesday, actually. And we look forward to an opportunity to present. So please stay tuned where that is concerned. But let's move on today's topic. But before we go to the break, Mr. Layla, welcome to the show. We're both wearing purple. And if you could explain to our listeners the reason for us wearing purple based on what yesterday represents and the fact that we continue to celebrate yesterday into today, um, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Michael. Pleasure to be here. Let me just, even before I get to yesterday, start by saying, March, I'm in general, Women's Month, March 8th is International Women's Day. So I've been wearing purple from yesterday, when the world recognizes March 8th as
And even though I didn't get a WhatsApp message from you to say anything, but you will be
International Women's
forgiven.
Day. And I thought I had sent messages to all the women in my life, but apparently I missed a few to say Happy International Women's Day yesterday. So that's why we are wearing purple and will be wearing purple for days to come in March, here at Jamaica Aid Support for Life. We also have our International Women's Day event coming up next week, because the day fell on a Sunday yesterday. So we invite everyone to join. Wear something purple. I even have a purple um, armband.
Ah,
Just,
okay.
yeah, just wear something purple throughout the month of March, and it's just in solidarity with our women, standing with women as we celebrate the significant contributions women have made to nation building and to the world, of course.
Yes. So the number of women in parliament, we reached a high in the current parliamentary cycle, if you will, and the previous one, but we still have a few road to or gains to make. We continue. As we mentioned earlier, Patrick and listeners, the Domestic Violence Act, and that's something that Jocelyn, of course, you personally and the organization have spoken extensively about. So we look forward to a future discussion on that. We're going to be talking in the future about issues like marital rape, which remains a concern for us. The compensation that women receive, even though I love to hear how some people are misguided in their view because we have more women managers, for example, it somehow means that we should not be concerned about women in the workplace and the amount of money that women make, which is disparate to what our male counterparts make. I don't remember the percentage or the dollar figure, but it's less than what our male counterparts make, right? I should flag this on my board as I outline that particular issue, but you know, let me
Gen-
behave. All right, we're
Inequality continues to be a challenge in all
yes,
spheres. It's something.
yes. All right, so we take the break and then we go right into the discussion for this week: decriminalization of consensual sex among minors. Stay tuned.
After the thrill of Messi in 2025, the CONCACAF Champions Cup is back in Kingston this March as Mount Pleasant FA welcomes LA Galaxy to the National Stadium on March 19. It's the Caribbean's best against former German international and Borussia Dortmund star Marco Reus and the Galaxy. Kickoff is at 6 p.m. Admission $2,000 pre-sold, $2,500 at the gate. Get your tickets now online at caribtix.com or in-store at Meister Sports Portmore, Boot Gas Station, Draxon and Constant Spring Road. Sponsored by the Global Institute of Sports, the Sports Development Foundation, Core A, Medicare Ambulance Services, and Happy Water.
From the biggest tracks to the biggest energy, Nationwide keeps it moving. If you love the vibes, come and lock in with us for real.
World boss, leave a prison could stop me.
Join the Nationwide 90 FM Family Club today on Patreon.
Practice. God me say you watch you off, me practice.
All right, welcome back to Let's Start Justice. So we are joined by Patrick Lalo, Policy and Advocacy Officer with Jamaica Aid Support for Life. Do we have Glenroy Murray on the call? Not seeing him on Zoom. All right. Not hearing from Glenroy as yet, but we are to be joined by Glenroy Murray, Executive Director of Equality for All Foundation. The team will try to get him. But Patrick, let's get right into the topic: decriminalization of consensual sex among minors. Before we go into what that means, I want you to explain to the listeners for us what exactly is the issue. What does the law say? And then we start going into some of the concerns that you have at Jamaica Aid Support for Life when you look, for example, at whether children are willing to come forward to get themselves tested and so on. What exactly is the issue with the current legal framing?
All right, the offense, sexual intercourse with a person under 16 is an offense. It is an offense regardless of, so the law says that a person who has not attained the age of 16 cannot consent. And it makes the age 16 the age at which they can consent to certain consent to sex, certain medical procedures, and the like. Although, let us not confuse that the age of majority is 18. So although children can consent to sex at 16, they are not considered adults until 18 legally. The problem with this offense, however, is that there is no consideration or exception for who the other party is. So a young lady who is 15 has sex with her 15-year-old boyfriend, or may I say her 14-year-old boyfriend. An offense is committed. And the offense is sexual intercourse with a person under 16, and there is no room in the law to take into consideration that, yes, this young lady is 15, but the young man she had sex with is also 15. Or he's 14, he's even younger than her. And the offense, as it stands in the law, disproportionately affects boys. The reason being, the offense is sexual intercourse with a person under 16. Sexual intercourse, as defined in the Sexual Offences Act, is the insertion of the penis of one person into the vagina of another. So therefore, by definition, it sets up the boy to commit the offense, and by definition, this also extends to rape, which is for a totally different discussion, where only a man can commit the offense of rape. So,
yeah. But before you continue, Patrick, I want to just interject so the listeners can appreciate this, because I know you framed correctly so that sexual intercourse suggests that only the male can commit an offense with other sections of the Sexual Offences Act. But the particular section 10 says a person, which suggests that there's gender neutrality, which means either party could and perhaps should be charged. So you're finding some issue there, because some people are of the view that when you look at the language of section 10, it suggests that both male and female should be charged. But I'm with you that there is some confusion.
Yes.
Yes.
I want us to focus on, and if you look at the data, the cases that have been brought and all of that, even though the section says a person, you realize how it's operationalized is in most instances, it is that I have seen, as far as I've seen, it's the boy that is charged. And the reality is the framing of section 10, where it says a person, even how the police operationalize sexual offenses and how they are treated, even when you look at rape, as I alluded to earlier, it generally comes down to the man being charged. But of course, the section leaves it open there for consideration. So people who hear this proposition, I remember I wrote an article in the Gleaner on this earlier this year in January, because I saw a writer to the editor who, one of the first misconceptions is that those of you who make this proposition is open up the door for sexual predators. And I think that is a misconception of what we are, what the position is. All we are saying is that as the law stands, we find that children are being dragged before the adversarial court system to face charges when they are in what we'd call in Jamaica boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. So one of the first things I want to make clear, this proposition does not come up when someone is saying, I was raped, or I was forced to have sex, or I did not give consent. And please remember, Mikhail sort of clarified it at the beginning of the show. When we use consent here, it may sound right. in terms of the context of what consent means, we're talking about a 15-year-old, for example, you may be thinking, how could we talk about consent? But when a young lady is saying this, and we're not talking about any coercion or anything, this is my boyfriend, we had sex willingly, he didn't force me, he didn't rape me. The law says you can't consent. You can't consent. So although you're 15 and this is your 15-year-old, a 15-year-old boy who you are saying is your boyfriend, we don't care what you say. He has an offense is committed, and him or even both of you could possibly face charges before the criminal court. So the opposition is saying, and later on I can get into the recommendations in terms of the age gap. But basically what we are saying is don't criminalize children in these situations who consensually, and I'm using that term again, engage in sexual intercourse with each other. And the proposition will clearly show that we also recommend that age range, which we'll get into later on.
Yeah. And if I may add to that, when we say consensual sex, it's simply saying that I agree to the activity. And it's a separation so that it is very clear that, again, there was no coercion. I was not forced into doing something. And Glenn Murray is on. Thank you so much, Glenn. And I hope you can also explain for the listeners that the law is less concerned, if you will, about whether the person said, I agree within the context of how I explained it versus creating that legal threshold. And I think it's important that the public gets the legality behind it rather than saying, why are we using the language of consensual sex because children can't consent? And you guys are promoting X. If you could just from a legal perspective, just break it down.
Yeah, thanks, Mikhail, and my apologies for the tardiness. So as you said, there is a distinction in how the law presents issues of consent within the context of sexual offenses. As I said a couple of weeks ago in the debate that we had up at the university, consent in fact is distinct from consent in law. The legislation itself acknowledges that there's a difference between when it in fact consents and when one in fact does not consent. So if you look at Section 3, it criminalizes sex without consent, without factual consent, and it does it with a minimum 15 years. It is important for the public to understand that if a 12-year-old, or let me use a different age, if a 14-year-old boy does non-consensually or with force sexually assaults a 13-year-old girl, that is considered, depending on the actual action, that could be rape, that could be previous sexual assault, right? So the law would punish him at a higher level because he committed the act of rape. In Section 10, which deals with sexual intercourse with a person under 16, the law says the mere fact that sex happened is enough to constitute the crime. And it doesn't even ask the question whether or not the other person in fact said yes, because the law acknowledges that in fact they could have said yes or if they could have said no. If they in fact said no, then it could have been a rape charge. But if they said yes, it doesn't matter. It is not a defense to Section 10. So that is what gets us here. The law distinguishes between what the young person says and creates two separate offenses to respond to those different facts.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. If you could as well, just to give you an opportunity to share your perspective on the issue before we get into some of what Jassel is seeing in terms of how this particular provision may create issues with children accessing, necessary HIV and other STI services. Just give your opening.
Sure. So the problem with the law is how it generally relates to other laws, right? So because of how that provision works, immediately, if the children engage in sexual activity, then it becomes a criminal matter that has to go through diversion and all of that. It complicates issues as far as it relates to providing sexual health services, Under the Child Care and Protection Act, those children become children in need of care and protection. That means that even if the children talk to a guidance counselor or a doctor seeking sexual health services, a report has to be made, right? That therefore puts them in a situation where they're less likely to come forward to talk about what they're engaging in and get the necessary support. So criminalization reduces the likelihood of engaging in needed psychosocial services, and that's why it's a problem, right? There are better ways to deal with early sexuality among adolescents, right? That does not have to immediately start with the punitive, especially when both of them are at least agreeing to do this activity with each other, and there's no coercion and there's no manipulation. And so that is why a more nuanced approach to the law is necessary, one that doesn't start at criminalization, but makes provision for criminalization in certain circumstances.
Yeah, thank you so much. Patrick, before we get to the break, just paint the picture for the public in terms of how this may create an issue to children, saying I had sex with my 15-year-old partner and I want to get myself tested for HIV or STI or accessing other sexual and reproductive health services.
All right, no problem. So, I mean, Glenroy made the point that there are other nuanced ways without starting with the criminal law in dealing with this issue. And the reality is, if a 15-year-old, 14-year-old, whatever the case may be, finds themselves to be with an STI or exhibiting symptoms of an STI, one of the first considerations they have to come forward to access well-needed medical and psychosocial services are, I already commit an offense. These people that I go to are possibly going to call my parents, the police, whoever the case may be. And what you'll find is that children are reluctant and very rarely will come forward because to go further, the law places a duty on us to report, to come forward for these services, even when they are exhibiting clear signs that they are ill, that they are with an STI, that they need some medical attention. They will not come forward because of this provision in the law. And I want people to understand that we have a duty to our children. We have a duty to our children. We have a duty to care for them and to protect them. And it becomes a problem when the very law that is supposed to ensure that it provides its act within the confines of the Child Care and Protection Act, which speaks to the best interest of the child, when the law itself creates a problem that does not work out in the best interest of the child, because all of these considerations the children have when they do engage in sexual activity where in fact they said yes.
Patrick, we have to take the break. Please hold the thought, and at the break we pick up, please.
Been hearing the teasers. Now it's official. Beginning Monday, February 9, 2026, Nationwide News Network launches something special. The Nationwide Family Club, exclusively on Patreon.
With the Family Club, members get early access to our documentaries before anyone else. Some of your favorite segments, including Cliff Says, What's on My Mind, Cover Story, and others will now be a click away inside the Family Club. There are 3 tiers of membership. First, Bronze, the Family Insider, behind-the-scenes access Monday motivational videos, members-only chats, and on-air birthdays and anniversary shoutouts.
Second, Silver, nationwide VIP. Breaking news alerts, exclusive documentaries, quizzes, personal milestones celebrated on air, and weekly family roll call mentions. Oh, and for our biggest supporters,
our gold category, elite listener, full archive access, early releases, private studio tours, live show experiences, personalized birthday videos, and exclusive live streams. From historic election coverage to lifetime, impact, Jamaican milestones, and rare archive content. This is nationwide like you've never seen it before. The Nationwide Family Club, coming to you February 9, 2026 on Patreon.
Join the family, support Nationwide 90 FM, the station that informs, entertains, and educates. Visit patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. That's patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. Nationwide Family Club, where you are family, because we see you as family.
Morning after morning, you've made Nationwide 90 FM part of your routine. So let's take this connection one step closer. Join the Nationwide 90 FM Family Club and be part of it officially on Patreon.
Family. Amazing family.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're discussing the issue of decriminalization of consensual sex among minors. And before we get back to our guests, just to read a few comments here in YouTube. Alex Smith said, I honestly don't think two children trying what mama and papa do should be criminalized. We should teach them to know that they can wait when they get older. And he's asking about parent disciplinary actions. As a parent, I don't know if I agree with you, at all, Alec. Right? I teach my child the right thing. But anyway, let me not say it's about me, right? So what else is here? I see Booker at last. Apparently he was a young hot stuff when he was younger. He said, when I was younger, many of my female peers would run me down. At times it was a hard fight. Poor you, right? And he also is speaking in just now to say that these young boys will be forced to wear body-worn cameras to protect themselves. All right. Patrick, just finish out your thought for me before we read some of the other comments over at IG as well. You're muted.
Yes. So, so as I was saying, we want to ensure that our laws are crafted bearing the best interest of the child principle in mind. And what we want is that children should feel comfortable to come forward to the adults in their life, to come forward for services if they need to. But the data is showing that this particular law, Section 10 in particular, creates a problem where children are afraid to come forward. And if they do come forward, then they are subject to the criminal law based on reports being made. And to go further, at Jamaica Aid Support for Life, it also prevents us from offering the service to them when they come, based on that. Even when it is very clear that, you conduct tests to determine if someone is with an STI, but someone can show up with some clear symptoms that they do have an STI, and you just do a test just for the purposes of confirming, and then basically to say, no, go get your parents who don't know that you are engaging in sex, much less to be with an STI. Go get them.
The parent could be the perpetrator of a sexual offense against the child as well.
Too, when the child is being abused. So there's this limitation where we can't even interrogate and get down to the bottom of it. So it is really a problem. And I want people not to get into the discussions around what are you trying to do? Are you just leaving children to have sex? The reality is, people, believe it or not, with this law or not, children are having sex out there.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is protect them, not put them more at risk. That's basically what this proposition does, is to protect them and not to put them.
And just to indicate, as Patrick was speaking, it's important that I put in perspective and context very quickly what the Knowledge, Attitude and Practices Survey from the Ministry of Health is saying, wherein you have less boys actually having sex based on the last data and more girls initiating. That's one. However, you do find that there is early sexual debut among a particular subset of children who are in fact having sexual intercourse, which means that though we have less boys and overall children having sex, it still raises a cause for concern when you have children having sexual intercourse very early. And you have heard, for example, and you saw in the Gleaner, it was a case that Jade represented the child where two 15-year-old having sex, the honor roll student, extremely bright young man. He was the only person charged in that particular matter, brought before the courts, missing school, placed on bail. Psychologically, he was so affected by the incident, and he eventually pled guilty because the child diversion did not work for him because of administrative issues. So when we appeared before Parliament, we also raised that as a cause for concern to the parliamentarians. And because of that particular incident, several of our calls are seemingly being positively considered by the Joint Select Committee. But let me bring in Glenroy here. Glenroy, if you can explain now, we talk about, what Section 10 and so on has and the implications of it. Can you explain to the listeners what exactly we're calling for, or start with what exactly does a closing age exemption means?
Okay. So thanks, Mikhail. A closing age exemption creates I want to use my words carefully, but it creates I want to say a little bit of an exception where, because the purpose of Section 10 and laws like it is to make sure there isn't exploitation happening of young children or young adolescents. That's the point. So you want to prevent the big man in the community or whoever from going to the little girl or the little boy, or the big woman from going to the little girl and little boy and taking advantage of them and then saying, oh, but I didn't want it. And that's why it doesn't allow for consent to be a defense within its formulation. But the reality is a lot of the cases end up being between two young people but around the same age engaging in consensual sexual activity. And that's just how things often play out when people find children having sex. We blame the children when it's the adult doing it, but then when it's two children, then everybody has to go and we blame them in such a way that keeps the adult out of court, but then we send the children to court immediately. And so the closing age exemption would allow a situation where when it's two people within a certain age bracket, I know JFJ's recommendation, it's about 2 to 3 years.
2 years when they're both under 16 and up to, less than 5 years. Let me not get myself into by using the language of up to. Less than 5 years when the child is at least 14.
14, right. But the point is it creates an exception where there are people where it's obviously a boyfriend-girlfriend situation or something similar to that. They aren't immediately criminalized. JFJ has a tiered recommendation where if they're both under 16, then there's no criminalization if they're within 2 years. But if the person is at least 14, the adolescent is at least 14, then it's less than 5 years. So if somebody up to 19, they would still be prosecuted, so to speak, but they have a defense to prevent them being convicted. So you wouldn't have like a guilty plea type of situation. Mm-hmm. So that then has the benefit of keeping young children out of the court system, whether or not they're diverted. And then if they do need to benefit from the psychosocial services, which we know they need, because the very data that you quoted, Mikhail, also shows the decrease in knowledge of STI and safe sex practices among our adolescents.
No condom being used in a lot of instances,
decrease in STI prevalence. So we know they need the knowledge and we know they're not getting it. So we don't want a legal and policy situation that reinforces those kind of sexual health data that is not favorable for young people. And so therefore that is the exemption. It says if it's a boyfriend and girlfriend situation within a certain age limit, then we'll use other methods. We won't go straight to criminalization. And there are other issues, of course, with how things are in terms of how divergent gets to happen. And I know JFJ has a report that kind of delves into some of the gaps and the challenges.
Yeah, thanks much. Patrick, I know Jassel, you had a recommendation for Parliament. And just to say to our listeners, I'm quite happy listening to our good minister, the Honorable Deloy Chuck. At the last couple of diversion meetings, he had made it expressly clear that Parliament is minded to move with putting in a closing age exemption, because the 2018 recommendation report, when the then Joint Select Committee reviewed the Sexual Offences Act, actually had made a recommendation then. And I'm happy to report that our minister reminded that Parliament is minded to put in place a closing age exemption. The question is, what exactly is that framework? But Patrick, I will allow you to speak to Jassel's position on this particular area.
You know, this discussion has been around for some time. It's not new at all. And we appeared before the Joint Select Committee, out of which that 2018 report came. And we made this recommendation actually twice, back in 2014 and again in 2016. Back in 2014 as part of a collective, and in 2016 as Jamaica Aid Support for Life. And the recommendation is between 2 and 4 years maximum. In Justin's submission, the maximum is 4 years. So what we are saying is, in the event that these children or persons engaging in sexual intercourse are saying, yes, we agreed to have we agreed to engage in sexual intercourse, and they are 2 years apart, 3 years apart, 4 years apart, where the child is up to 15, I think it said in our submission, then the closing age exemption will come into play for them. And this is basically saying...
Hold that thought for me. We have to take the break, but I wanted to finish out in explaining the 4 years apart and the thought that you were about to share. Please.
Absolutely.
The vibes, the laughs, and the real talk, then you're one of us. Don't just listen, belong. Join the Nationwide 90FM Family Club on Patreon.
CFOs and senior decision makers across the Caribbean, this is your moment. The Caribbean CFO Summit goes live March 24 and 25, 2026. 2 days, 13 CPD accredited hours, one powerful virtual gathering of the region's leading finance minds. This is where strategy meets innovation, where restructuring meets execution, where finance leaders prepare for what the next decade demands. Registration closes March 24. Do not sit this one out. Secure your seat now at CaribbeanCFOSummit.com.
Tune in to the Revolution in Media on Tuesday, March 10 for Nationwide's post-budget analysis series. From 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m., our panel of experts will break down the national budget and what it means for businesses, workers, and you. Hear insights from President of the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, Catherine Silvera, Senior Lecturer of Economics at UWI Mona, Dr. Christine Clark, Senior Tax Manager at the JN Group, Everald Dewar, Managing Director of A. Peart Advisory Services, Alison Peart, and Social Commentator Newton Harris. Don't miss Nationwide's post-budget analysis series on Tuesday, March 10 during Nationwide at 5. from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, a revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We are discussing the issue of decriminalization of consensual sex among minors. Patrick, you were explaining Jassel's position. And to clarify, when you say 4 years, it's 4 years plus, plus, plus. Doesn't reach 5, but 4 years plus, plus, plus.
Right, it doesn't reach 5.
Okay. Yes, please finish out the thought.
And just to be clear, in terms of the distinction between where we say 2 years versus 4 years. So if the child is 13, for example, our proposition is that the exemption would not apply to anyone over, where the child is 13, the exemption would not apply to anyone over 16. Where the child is 15, 13, 14, 16, where the child is 15, the exemption would go as far as to 19 and no further. So this proposition that we would be normalizing, the position that some people take, we're normalizing the big man taking set on the little girl culture, or the big woman and the little boy. That is not the case here. Because what I want our listeners not to miss is that this only comes into play where where parties are saying, yes, we in fact said yes to the act of sexual intercourse. Our proposition also goes along with education, because I also hear the voices out there that say, educate the children, make them delay and not wanting to have sex, as opposed to legalizing them, for want of a better word. What we are saying, it's not an either or. Both needs to happen. Both needs to happen. The reality is the data shows that children delay their sexual debut the more information they have. So we are not saying put aside education and just allow them to do what they want. No, we are saying both must go hand in hand, because the reality is we still have a challenge in our schools where children are not being given the appropriate information about sex, and you still have parents who can decide that I don't want you talking to my children about sex at school, and that is not happening. And back to the studies and the data, even the data around HIV new infections is showing an increase in the 15 to, I think it goes 19. Up to 24 age group that are accounting for a large number of new infections. So the reality is, what this is doing is providing better protections for our children, not criminalizing young people who engage in, and I don't want to say consensual, who in fact agreed, I'm using Glenn White's word, who in fact said yes to having intercourse, and they are within that age band. Nothing outside of the age band would have the benefit of claiming such a defense.
One of the things, and just to quickly say before I ask Glenroy this question, one of the things which requires clarity, because the 2018 recommendations did not necessarily say whether it's a no offense that is being recommended or a statutory defense. And there are two different things. So if we look to South Africa's model, which actually came by the way of a constitutional challenge, the first tier is no offense, where a Canada's model, for example, is a statutory defense that can be raised. And I heard the minister saying that that is something to be discussed when the time comes. So please, Patrick, and I know Jassel has its recommendation, but as we learn and grow as organization, that I think that's instructive for us to differentiate between, as the minister himself raised. But to Glenroy, I want to ask you this. The question that often arises, and I heard it in Parliament at the last Joint Select Committee sitting, two things. Why are we making the recommendation for the no exemption to go up to 19 years old? And is it not a big man situation, a predator situation that we're advocating for? And if we were to be asking for a closing age exemption, it should stop at 17-year-old. That's the first question. How do you respond to that? And I know we're pretty much aligned, but because you're the guest,
Sure.
please.
Yeah, quickly. I think we have to accept the fact that our laws provide some leeway for people, already provide some leeway for people over the age of 16 or 17 in the form of the Young Man's Defense in the Sexual Offences Act, which allows somebody up to the age of 21 or 23 to say, I thought she was 16 and over, and that gives him a defense, specifically because of the age category that he's in. So I don't think it's enough to pretend as if 18 and 19-year-olds are the same type of adult as somebody in their 20s and 30s. I think very reasonably, if we look at the facts, 17, 18, 19-year-olds are high schoolers. They are in these relationships with people who are some years younger than them, relationships that maybe before a certain birthday would have fallen under the scope of the protection, the closing age protection. And I think because of that can be considered within the context of what we're saying. What's critical is that based on the proposals that the JFJ has provided and that we have supported, it's that the 19-year-old still has to be within a certain age range. It can be 19 and the other person be 12, or 19 and 13. The cutoff for that is if the person has to be 15, right? Which is just 1 year shy of 16 anyways. And so there still are safeguards to reduce the imbalance and the concerns that people have. And so it doesn't, in my view, take on the character of the significantly older man and the adolescent girl, or the significantly older woman and the adolescent boy at all. And that's why I feel like the nuance of it is important for us to consider.
And just another question quickly. We have gotten pushback that we are talking about that nice 18 or 19-year-old who is in sixth form, doing the A levels and getting ready for university, versus apparently we're not cognizant of the realities that you may have gangsters who send for little girls in communities. If you could respond to such a criticism as well.
I'll respond in the same way that I responded in the debate the other day, which is to say that if that is the example that we're going to be jumping off from, then the reality is that we're talking about a coercive situation. We're talking about a situation within which somebody with authority and power is forcing themselves onto someone younger. And then it doesn't even become about the conversation of consent in fact versus coercion. No, it's just about it's easier to get them on Section 10 because of the circumstances. And so that's where that comes from. It's saying it is easier to do this because we don't have to do the business of investigating properly, protecting witnesses, protecting victims so that we can secure convictions. We don't have to do all of that. We just need the sex to happen. We get the rape kit that proves that sex happened and we put them in jail. And while I can understand how for somebody working in law enforcement, especially, that is a useful tool, I don't know if preserving that tool outweighs the current impact that we have, which is that more than half of the child diversion cases are I might have that number wrong, or almost half deal with sexual intercourse with a person under 16.
Yeah.
They're very clear consequences of maintaining things as they are. And so I think with this, is a challenge to law enforcement to actually make it prosecuting sexual offenses something that can be done in ways that don't traumatize victims, that make them want to come forward, so that you don't end up in the situation where the only way to catch the errant gang member running after the little girl is to use the easy crime that you don't need to talk too much about mens rea.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
we're trying.
And just to be clear, if such a situation does happen, they should be fully prosecuted. We all agree on that. Patrick, as we're close to the end, but here is a comment or question from competent Corinne. If children are having sex knowing the law, if the law is changed, what will the effect be?
Well, we were not at all proposing that it is going to make children not have sex. I had said earlier that...
In other words, would it open the floodgates?
Right. And I don't necessarily agree that it is going to open the floodgates. I think people have to look at the position from where we come. The position from where we come is about protecting children who say yes to each other within that age band in the whole circumstance of having sexual intercourse. I don't think it's going to open the floodgates, because we are also saying, along with this change in the law, we have to step up the way we educate our children in schools around sexual intercourse. And I did say earlier that the data shows that more informed children do delay their sexual dating. So we're not opening up the floodgates. Children are having sex. You can go on YouTube now and find tons of videos of children having sex in uniforms at identifiable schools. You don't have to wonder if that's a school girl or that's a school.
15 seconds, Patrick, before we have to close out. Yes.
All we are saying is, let us do this along with the education in order to save our children from having to interface with the adversarial criminal justice system. And finally, quickly, I will have some more to say in our submissions around the position of either no offense or a statutory defense. That is to come. Yeah.
All right, thank you. The answer for this week's trivia, mandatory minimum for having sexual intercourse with a person under 16. And competent Corinne got it correct. There is no specific mandatory minimum sentence for Section 10, except for a person who is in the position of authority, where it becomes 15 years. So competent Corinne, you won last week. You're taking over from news commentator, right? So news commentator, you have some competition happening there. Please WhatsApp 2397583. And I look forward to more discussion with two of my favorite people, as I said at the start. So we thank Patrick Layla and Glenroy Murray for taking time out of their busy day to joining us. So see you all next week.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Bye. Take care.
Thanks. So that's it.
Patrick,
Justice, the people's champion. Justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
Join the National Cleanup and Volunteer Drive. Let's restore our communities one street, one home, one heart at a time. Sign up at supportjamaica.gov.jm. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is
2 minutes after 2.